Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that's super important to a lot of you out there, I bet, and that's planning for a comfortable and secure retirement. And one of the strategies we're diving deep into today is how gold can actually play a role in that plan.
Yeah, gold, right. It's not just for jewelry or, sitting in a vault. We're going to be looking at how some seriously wealthy families think $100 million portfolios are using gold.
That's right.
And more importantly, how you can adapt those same strategies to your own retirement goals. Even if you know you're not working with quite 100 million.
Exactly.
We want to make this relevant for everyone, so.
And for those of you who are ready to start exploring, adding a little bit of golden security to your retirement plan, make sure to head over to goldirblueprint.com/exclusive for a free checklist. That checklist is going to give you some really important questions to ask when you're choosing a gold IRA company.
Absolutely. That checklist is really going to help you make informed decisions.
All right, let's get into it. Gold. It's more than just a shiny metal, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us kind of think of gold as like, oh, it's pretty, or like you said, it's just sitting at Fort Knox somewhere.
Right, exactly. But gold has this incredible history, as a safe haven asset.
Mm.
It's been a store of value literally for centuries. Think about it. When things start to get a little shaky in the economy, inflation, currency fluctuations, even those big geopolitical events that make everybody nervous, gold tends to hold its value pretty well.
So it's like, what, a financial anchor in the middle of a storm?
Exactly. A financial anchor. It kind of gives you that stability when things are uncertain. Like, remember back in 2023 when gold was averaging almost $1,900 an ounce?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of shows you how resilient it can be.
So how does all of this translate to my retirement planning?
Right.
Where does the gold IRA come in?
Great question. That's where we're going next. A gold IRA, it's basically a special type of individual retirement account, similar to the traditional IRAs that many people have. But with a gold IRA, you're investing in actual physical gold.
No. Okay, I get the idea of an IRA, but what makes the gold IRA different? I mean, aside from, having gold instead of stocks or whatever.
Right. The big difference is that with a gold IRA, you're investing in physical gold, coins or bars, held by a custodian for you. That's where that self-directed thing comes in. You get more say in your investment choices than with a traditional IRA. And that brings us to another key point, the tax advantages. You defer paying taxes on any gains in a gold IRA until you start taking those withdrawals in retirement.
Makes sense. Especially when you think about how high the federal state tax exemption is right now, $12.92 million for 2025.
Yeah.
Managing assets and minimizing taxes is crucial.
Exactly. And this is where gold can really be beneficial as a part of a well-rounded retirement portfolio.
Yeah.
Now let's look at how those folks managing, say, a $100 million portfolio are using gold in their IRAs.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, there's no secret formula or anything, but a good starting point is usually somewhere between 5 and 10% of the portfolio allocated to physical gold within their IRA.
So it's not about going all in on gold. It's more about having a portion of your assets in gold to provide that stability. But why 5 to 10%? Is there a reason for that range?
It's all about balance and managing risk. You see, gold has historically had, well, what we call a negative correlation with stocks, meaning when stock prices drop, gold often goes up.
Interesting. So if the market takes a dip, gold is there to soften the blow.
You got it. It acts like a shock absorber for your overall portfolio, helping you to potentially weather those market storms a little better. Now, one important thing to remember is not all gold is created equal, especially when it comes to IRAs. The IRS has specific rules about the types of gold that can be held in an IRA.
So you're telling me I can't just, melt down my old jewelry and stick it in my IRA?
Afraid not. The IRS has strict guidelines for a reason, mainly to ensure the purity and quality of the gold. We're talking about things like American Eagle coins, Canadian Maple Leaf coins, or gold bars with a purity of at least 99.5%, and you definitely want to make sure you're following those guidelines to avoid any penalties.
So it's essential to find a custodian who really knows the ins and outs of these regulations.
Absolutely. That's another critical point. You need a custodian who specializes in self-directed IRAs and understands those IRS guidelines. They'll be able to ensure everything is done by the book and that your gold is stored securely.
Right. It sounds like having the right custodian is key to making this whole thing work smoothly. But how does all of this fit into the larger picture of estate planning? We've touched on minimizing taxes during your lifetime, but how can you use a gold IRA to potentially protect your assets and pass them on to your loved ones?
That's an excellent question. and one we'll explore more deeply in our next segment.
Awesome.
But the short answer is gold IRAs can be incredibly powerful tools for estate planning, particularly when you use them in conjunction with certain types of trusts.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of trust are we talking about?
Well, there are a couple of options that can be particularly beneficial. First, there are charitable remainder trusts, or CRTs for short. Those can be a great way to align wealth preservation strategies with philanthropic goals.
So you can potentially reduce your tax liability and support a cause you believe in at the same time. That sounds like a win-win.
Exactly. And then there are generation skipping transfer trusts, or GST trusts. Those are specifically designed to minimize tax liabilities when assets are passed down to grandchildren or even later generations.
It sounds like you can create a kind of golden safety net for your family's future with these trusts.
Right. By incorporating gold into these trusts, you can potentially shield a significant portion of your wealth from estate taxes, leaving a larger legacy for your loved ones.
That's powerful stuff. But before we get too deep into the world of trusts, let's step back for a second and compare gold IRAs to more traditional investments, like stocks and bonds. What are the key differences that potential investors should be aware of?
That's a crucial question, and to answer it fully, we're going to need to delve into a bit more detail. So before we do, I want to remind everyone about that free checklist available at goldirablueprint.com/exclusive. It's full of questions to ask potential gold IRA companies to help you make the best choices for your situation.
Great reminder. Choosing the right custodian is probably the most important decision you'll make when setting up a gold IRA.
You got that right. It's all about finding a partner you can trust who really understands your needs and can guide you through the entire process.
Right. So let's dive into the heart of the matter. Gold IRAs versus those traditional investment options. Where should we start?
Well, let's begin with the most basic question, risk. How does the risk of investing in a gold IRA compare to, say, putting your money in the stock market?
Okay, risk. That's a good place to start.
Gold is generally considered a lower risk investment compared to stocks. While all investments come with some level of risk, gold tends to be less volatile, meaning its value doesn't swing up and down as dramatically as stocks do in the short term.
So it's potentially a smoother ride, but does that mean you have to sacrifice potential growth? How does gold stack up against stocks in terms of how much your investment might grow?
That's a great point. You have to consider potential growth when making any investment decision. Historically, gold hasn't generated the same level of returns as the stock market over long periods. However, remember, gold's value proposition isn't solely about growth. It's about preservation and protection.
So it's not necessarily about hitting a home run with massive returns, but more about building a stable foundation that can withstand market ups and downs.
Exactly. Think of it as a way to potentially safeguard your purchasing power and preserve your wealth, especially during times of economic uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another key difference, taxes.
Right, we talked earlier about the tax-deferred benefits of gold IRAs, but how does that compare to how taxes work with traditional investments?
Well, with stocks and bonds, you typically pay taxes on capital gains and dividends as you earn them. That can really eat into your returns, especially if you're in a higher tax bracket. Gold IRAs, on the other hand, give you the ability to defer those taxes until you retire, allowing your investments to go tax-free for a much longer time.
That's a pretty big advantage. But I'm guessing there are still tax implications when you eventually take money out of a gold IRA.
You're absolutely right. We'll definitely cover those specifics of distributions and their tax implications in our next segment.
Okay, sounds good. So let's talk about accessing your money. We've talked about gold being a good long-term investment, but what about liquidity? How easy is it to convert your gold investments back into cash if you need to access those funds?
That's a really important question, and it's one we'll discuss in detail in our next segment. We'll cover the ins and outs of distributions and how you can access your funds, whether it be in cash or as physical gold.
Okay, so stay tuned for that. Knowing how to access your funds when you need them is definitely key for peace of mind.
Absolutely, and it's something we'll cover thoroughly. But before we move on, let me quickly address one thing I know people often ask about gold IRAs, and that's fees.
Yeah, fees are always a consideration with any investment. What can people expect with a gold IRA, and how do those fees compare to traditional IRAs?
That's right. It's true that gold IRAs tend to have slightly higher fees than your typical IRA, and that's primarily because of the costs associated with storing and insuring physical gold. You'll usually have setup fees, annual maintenance fees, and storage fees, all of which are essential to keep your gold safe and your IRA properly managed.
So those added costs come with the peace of mind that your gold is being looked after by professionals.
Right. Exactly. Plus, those fees are usually very transparent, so you'll know exactly what you're paying for. Now, before we get into the details of how to access your funds from a gold IRA, let's circle back to the estate planning benefits we talked about earlier. How can gold IRAs help to potentially minimize tax liabilities and protect your assets for future generations?
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more.
Remember those trusts we talked about earlier, the charitable remainder trusts and the generation skipping transfer trusts?
Yeah?
Those can be really powerful tools when it comes to estate planning with a gold IRA. We'll go into more detail in our next segment, but they can make a big difference in how much of your wealth is passed on to your heirs.
Sounds like something everyone should know about.
Definitely. We'll get into all of that in part 2. But for now, let me just reiterate that free checklist available at goldirblueprint.com for exclusive. It's a valuable resource that can help you navigate the world of gold IRAs and make sure you're asking the right questions.
Right, because choosing the right custodian can make all the difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've laid a good foundation here. In part 2, we'll really dig deep into those distributions and how you can access your funds, whether it be in cash or as physical gold.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So in part 1, we were talking about the advantages of gold as that safe haven asset and how a gold IRA can really, I think, enhance your retirement strategy. So now let's kind of shift gears a little bit and dig into a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds, and that is, how do you actually access your funds in a gold IRA, when you need them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's got to be top of mind for anybody who's considering, putting their money into a gold IRA.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your money. You want to know that you can get to it when you need it.
Exactly. And, it's all about having those options and that flexibility when it comes to, your hard-earned retirement savings.
So let's break it down. What are the ways that you can actually access your funds in a gold IRA?
You've got a couple of main options when it comes to taking distributions from a gold IRA. The first one is pretty straightforward. You can take a distribution in cash, just like you would with the traditional IRA.
Oh, okay. So if you need to access funds for, living expenses or medical bills or, whatever reason, you can just request a distribution in cash.
Exactly. And just like a traditional IRA, those distributions are going to be taxed as ordinary income in the year that you receive them.
Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, those potential tax implications, as you're planning your withdrawals.
Definitely now the second option is where things get a little bit interesting. With a gold IRA, you can actually choose to take possession of the physical gold itself.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me I could actually hold my gold in my hand?
You got it. If you prefer to have, direct control over your gold, you can, make arrangements to take physical possession of those coins or bars that are held in your IRA.
That's pretty cool. It's a pretty unique feature of a gold IRA.
Mm-hmm.
So logistically, how does that actually work? Do I just show up at the custodian's office and say, like, hey, I want my gold now?
It's a little bit more involved than that, but the process is actually pretty straightforward. You'd work with your custodian to initiate a distribution in the form of physical gold. They'll handle all the logistics of securely transferring your assets from the depository to a location that you designate.
So there are procedures in place,
Yeah.
to make sure that everything is safe and secure.
Exactly. Security is, paramount when you're dealing with precious metals. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about another really crucial aspect of gold IRAs, and that is estate planning. We touched on this a little bit in part 1, talking about how trusts can be these powerful tools for protecting your assets and minimizing the tax burden on your heirs. So let's dig a little deeper into how gold IRAs can be integrated into a comprehensive estate plan.
Yeah, this is where things start to get really interesting. We've been talking about the tax advantages during your lifetime, but how can those benefits extend to your family, to your loved ones after you're gone?
That's where these trusts come in. By naming a trust as the beneficiary of your gold IRA, you can potentially shield those assets from estate taxes and make sure that there's a smooth transfer of wealth to your heirs.
So the gold IRA becomes like a part of a bigger picture. It's not just a standalone retirement account.
Exactly. So let's revisit those two types of trusts that we mentioned earlier, those charitable remainder trusts and those generation skipping transfer trusts.
Right. Okay, yeah, I'm ready for a refresher.
All right, so with a charitable remainder trust, you're essentially donating your gold IRA to a charity of your choice, but you retain the right to receive an income stream from those assets for a certain period of time. And then after that period, the remaining assets in the trust go to the charity that you've designated.
So you're supporting a cause you believe in, and you're also potentially reducing your estate tax liability. I mean,
Exactly.
that's great.
A win-win.
What about those generation skipping transfer trusts? How do those work with gold IRAs?
All right, so a generation skipping transfer trust, or a GST trust, is designed specifically to pass assets down to your grandchildren or later generations while minimizing those estate taxes. So by naming a GST trust as the beneficiary of your gold IRA, you could potentially bypass a whole generation of estate taxes, allowing more of your wealth to be passed down to your heirs.
Wow, that's a really powerful tool for people who are, really looking to create a lasting legacy for their family.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's switch gears again and talk about something that comes up a lot when people are considering gold IRAs, and that's fees. We know that gold IRAs typically have slightly higher fees than traditional IRAs, but can you break that down for us a little bit more? Give us some specifics so that our listeners know what to expect.
Yeah, fees are always, a factor when you're choosing any kind of investment, so it's good to be informed.
Right, exactly. So as I mentioned earlier, those slightly higher fees, they're mainly due to the added costs of storing and insuring the physical gold. You're typically going to encounter three main types of fees. You'll have setup fees, annual maintenance fees, and storage fees.
Okay, let's start with those setup fees.
Hmm.
What are those, and what kind of, what should people be budgeting for?
All right, so setup fees, those are a one-time charge that you pay when you establish your gold IRA account. They cover things like the administrative costs of opening the account, processing the paperwork, setting up your storage arrangements, things like that. The fees themselves can vary depending on the custodian that you choose, but you can generally expect to pay somewhere between a couple $100s to a few $1,000s.
Okay, so to factor that in, to your overall investment plan.
Hmm.
What about those annual maintenance fees?
Right. So annual maintenance fees, those cover the ongoing administrative costs of managing your account. Things like record keeping, reporting, customer service, that sort of thing. Those fees also vary depending on the custodian, but they're usually going to fall somewhere between a few $100s to several $100s per year.
Okay, so it's an ongoing cost to keep in mind. What about those storage fees?
All right, so storage fees cover the cost of securely storing your physical gold in an IRS-approved depository. These depositories are highly specialized facilities. They have state-of-the-art security to protect your assets, and those fees are usually calculated based on the weight and the value of your gold holdings, and they can range from a fraction of a percent to a few percent of your total assets each year.
So you definitely want to, consider those storage fees when you're, figuring out the overall cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, it's worth noting that these fees are typically very transparent. Reputable custodians are going to provide you with a clear breakdown of all the fees associated with your gold IRA upfront, so you'll know exactly what to expect.
Transparency is always good, especially when we're talking about, financial matters. So before we move on to our final segment, let me just remind our listeners about that free checklist that's available at goldirblueprint.com for exclusive. It's full of essential questions to ask potential gold IRA companies.
Yeah.
It can really help you navigate this whole world with confidence.
Yeah, that checklist is a fantastic resource. Choosing the right custodian is honestly one of the most important decisions you're going to make when you're setting up a gold IRA.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that trusted partner.
Right.
Somebody who understands your needs and can guide you through the process. All right, so now let's zoom out a little bit and look at how gold specifically within a gold IRA fits into the bigger picture of a well-rounded retirement portfolio.
Welcome back to the Gold IRA Blueprint podcast. So far, we've talked about gold's history as a safe haven asset and how it can potentially fit into your retirement planning. We even got into the nitty-gritty of setting up a gold IRA and accessing those funds. Now, in this final part, let's step back and look at the big picture. How does gold, specifically in a gold IRA, fit into a well-rounded retirement portfolio?
Great question. We've covered gold's unique qualities, like its potential to hedge against inflation and those tax advantages of a gold IRA. But gold's just one piece of the whole retirement puzzle, right?
Sure.
Right. It's not about going all in on gold. It's about diversification. So how should we think about gold compared to other investments like stocks and bonds?
Think of it like a balanced meal. You wouldn't want to eat just one type of food, right? You need variety, different nutrients to stay healthy. Same with your portfolio. It needs a mix of asset classes. Each one has its own risk, potential for growth, and role in reaching your financial goals.
Okay, I like that analogy. So where does gold fit in? Is it the main course, a side dish, or maybe dessert?
I'd say gold's often seen as the safe haven part of your portfolio. It's what can bring stability and protection when other assets get volatile. It might not be the star of the show, but it plays a crucial supporting role.
So stocks and bonds could be the main course, offering growth potential, while gold is there to add balance and a sense of security when the market gets rough.
Exactly. And just like you tweak your meal plan depending on what your body needs, you can adjust how much gold you have in your portfolio. It all depends on your risk tolerance, how long you're investing for, and what your overall goals are.
Makes sense. We've talked about the good stuff with gold, but let's be real. Gold's not a magic solution. It's not going to make you rich overnight.
Right. It's a long-term strategy. Gold's more about hedging, protecting your purchasing power, and preserving wealth, especially when things are economically uncertain.
So if you're trying to double your money quickly, gold's probably not the answer. But if you want a strong foundation for a comfortable retirement, it could be a valuable addition.
Absolutely. It's about understanding your goals, your risk tolerance, and how different investments can help you achieve what you want.
And if anyone's feeling lost, it's always a good idea to talk to a financial advisor. They can help you create a retirement plan that's tailored to you.
Great point. They're like your financial coach, helping you navigate the complexities of investing and making those smart decisions.
Speaking of guidance, for those ready to jump into gold IRAs, remember that free checklist over at goldirablueprint.com/exclusive. It's got all the questions you should be asking potential gold IRA companies.
Yep, that checklist is key. Picking the right custodian is probably the most important decision you'll make when setting up a gold IRA.
Couldn't agree more. All right, as we wrap up this deep dive into gold IRAs, let's recap some key takeaways.
Love it. What are the big points you want listeners to remember?
Well, first off, gold has this long history as a safe haven, and it can be a valuable piece of a diversified retirement plan.
Second, gold IRAs offer a tax-advantaged way to include gold in your retirement savings.
Third, choosing a good, reputable custodian is essential for the safety and proper management of your gold.
And lastly, retirement planning is a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient, do your research, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Well said. And remember, in a world that's always changing, taking control of your financial future is more important than ever. How will you secure your golden years?
That's a great question for everyone to think about. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive on gold IRAs. We hope you found this information helpful and empowering. Remember, the journey to a secure retirement is a personal one. Do your research, ask those questions, and make choices that work for you. We wish you all the best in reaching your financial goals.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that matters to your financial journey. Until then, keep learning and stay informed.